Operation Enduring Freedom was meant to be a conventional fight against known enemies in the high mountains of Afghanistan. But for one elite Special Forces unit, the mission turned into something straight out of a nightmare when they entered a remote cave in 2002. Many stories from the war are documented, but what happened near Kandahar was buried under layers of classified files and threats. See, there is a key detail most people miss about why a whole squad vanished without a trace. It is not that simple, though, because what emerged from that dark cave was a 15-foot-tall red-haired monster that changed everything. Ancient behemoths hiding in Kandahar.
You were in Afghanistan in 2002, and you were called into a very remote section of Afghanistan because a patrol had basically gone missing.
Exactly.
Okay, and
Exactly.
there's no
Well,
villages
just
around
nothing
for miles.
Right.
So it's very remote.
Yeah, very remote. So we flew in. About 4 kilometers. We're hiking through the same area where they were supposed to make one of their checkpoints, one of their rally points. And before we'd left, there was all kinds of what happened with the ambush, but that was even odd because at the point of the ambush, you would call for maybe close air support, something, okay? There was no calls made, just off the grid. So we're coming down a mountainside, and it was a nice path, a goat path. As we bent around this corner, you could see this opening of the cave. There's a cave as we're coming around. And then I see there's a lot of rocks, which is another oddity, and then bone matter. I'm not close enough to identify what kind of bones, but I did see something I knew was a piece of our communications equipment. So instantly, we're thinking ambush, maybe animal, it could be anything. And there was enough room in front of this cave, but it had a sheer drop-off. But there was enough room that we actually got into a decent dispersal in case of ambush.
You see something coming out of the cave, and it's moving with a speed and agility that catches you off guard.
Everybody. And he comes out. It was a man at least 12 to 15 feet in height. This is a monster. Red beard, then his hair was longish, past the shoulder, a scarlet red, and Dan runs at him and starts shooting, which broke all of us into the reality. Because it was
So
surreal.
now your training is kicking in.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
Muscle memory, complete muscle memory. While Dan is moving at him, another bro of mine's laying down fire and I start firing. He skewers Dan. He's now got him on this pike. It went through him. And he's still got him, and he's coming after more. We all just clicked in. I don't know what it was, but I remember we're all like, shoot him in the face, shoot him in the face. Our weapons components were M4s, we had 308s, and we had Barrett 50s. This is sounding longer than it took. We're talking 30 seconds. And he's taking multiple hits and is still moving.
In the early months of 2002, the southern regions of Afghanistan were a maze of jagged peaks and hidden valleys. Military operations were constant as teams moved through the desert to find enemy hideouts. Most missions were routine for the highly trained soldiers involved, but one patrol near Kandahar simply stopped responding. One moment they were checking a supply route, and the next they were gone. No radio calls, no distress signals, and no traces on the radar. This is a key detail because seasoned soldiers do not just vanish in the middle of a mission. The terrain in that part of the world is unforgiving, filled with caves that have been used for thousands of years. But this particular location felt different to those who went looking for the missing men. When the recovery team was sent in, they expected a typical ambush site. They looked for spent shells or signs of a struggle with local fighters. Instead, they found something that made no sense. Gear was scattered everywhere, But it was not just dropped, it was shredded. Tactical vests were ripped apart, and heavy communication packs were crushed as if they were made of paper. There are still many rumors in the air, but what many can confirm is that the scene looked like a predator had moved through, not a group of men. The air was thick with the smell of old copper and rotting meat, which is a common sign of a predator's den. Basically, the elite unit realized they were not walking into a war zone, but into a hunting ground. As they moved toward the mouth of a massive cave, the silence was heavy. Nobody expected this to happen, but the deeper they went, the more they realized the missing squad had been taken inside. There were no bodies at the entrance, only more gear and fragments of uniforms. The Special Forces team fanned out, their weapons ready for anything. They used high-tech thermal gear to scan the darkness, but the cave was deep and cold. One of the most overlooked aspects of this story is how deep these mountain tunnels go. Some people say they lead to underground cities, while others believe they are home to things that have been hiding since ancient times. And get this, the team found bones. Not just animal bones, but human remains that were cracked and tossed aside. It was clear that whatever lived in this cave was powerful enough to take down armed soldiers without letting them fire a single effective shot. The soldiers kept moving, their boots crunching on the dry floor, until they saw a glint of metal stuck in the rock wall. It was a rifle barrel bent at a 45-degree angle by sheer physical strength. This is where the story gets really strange because no human can bend a reinforced rifle barrel with their bare hands. They were dealing with something that had physical power far beyond a normal man. What most people do not realize is that the Afghan mountains are home to secrets that local people have feared for centuries. The team was now deep inside the earth, and the smell of decay was becoming unbearable. It was not just the smell of a few days. It was the smell of a place that had seen many years of death. The tension was at an all-time high as they turned a corner and saw a massive shadow moving in the back of the cavern. It was upright, walking like a man, but its head almost touched the ceiling. The soldiers braced themselves for a fight that would soon become a legend among those who served in the region. Something moved in the deep shadows of the cave that would change the history of the war forever. Brutal firefight beyond human understanding. The encounter happened in a heartbeat. As the team moved deeper, a massive figure stepped out of the darkness and into the dim light. It was hands down the most terrifying thing any of them had ever seen. The creature stood between 12 and 15 feet tall. It had thick, matted red hair that fell past its shoulders and a beard that covered most of its chest. But here is the catch. It was not just tall. It was wide and powerful, with skin that looked like sun-baked leather. Its eyes were deep in its skull and glowed with a strange light as it looked at the intruders. It did not look like a monster from a movie. It looked like a prehistoric human that had never stopped growing. Before anyone could react, the giant lunged forward with a massive spear. The weapon was made of a heavy, dark wood tipped with a jagged piece of metal. It moved with a speed that was impossible for something of that size. One of the soldiers, a man later identified as Dan, was caught in the path of the spear. The giant impaled him instantly, lifting him off the ground as if he weighed nothing at all. The rest of the squad did not hesitate. They opened fire with everything they had. M4 carbines and specialized rifles barked in the small space, filling the cave with smoke and the deafening sound of lead hitting stone and flesh. The crazy part is that the giant did not fall right away. It took hit after hit and kept moving, swinging its massive arms and roaring with a sound that vibrated in the soldiers' chests. It was a raw, animalistic sound that didn't belong to any language. For 30 seconds, The cave was a storm of gunfire. The soldiers were trained to aim for the head, but even those shots seemed to only slow the behemoth down. It was as if its bones were reinforced, or its hide was too thick for standard rounds. The team had to use their heaviest weapons, including a .50 caliber sniper rifle, to finally bring the creature to its knees. When the giant finally collapsed, the weight of its body hitting the floor felt like a small earthquake. The squad kept their weapons trained on it for several minutes, waiting to see if it would move again. It stayed still. Up close, the details were even more shocking. The giant had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. This is a key detail because many ancient texts mention a race of 6-fingered giants that once ruled the earth. Its teeth were large and sharp, clearly meant for eating meat. The leathery moccasins it wore were made of thick animal hides, stitched together with what looked like dried tendons. Everyone is obsessed with the idea of aliens, but this was something biological and terrestrial. It felt ancient, like a relic of a world that had vanished long ago. The smell of the creature was a mix of sweat, old blood, and something like musk. It was a massive physical presence that dominated the entire cavern. The soldiers were in shock, looking between their fallen comrade and the mountain of flesh they had just neutralized. They knew they had to report this, but they also knew that what they had just seen would be impossible for the world to believe. Despite the heavy gunfire and the massive body on the floor, the real battle was only beginning. Vanished evidence and military silence. Immediately after the threat was over, the Special Forces team called for a high-level extraction. They did not just need a medical flight for their fallen friend. They needed someone to handle the massive biological anomaly sitting in the cave. Within a short time, a Chinook helicopter arrived at the remote location. This was not a standard transport. And get this, the personnel who stepped off the aircraft did not wear any unit patches or name tags. They were dressed in sterile, plain uniforms and worked with a level of silence that was eerie. They did not ask the soldiers for a story. They just started setting up a heavy netting system to move the body. The giant was so heavy that the helicopter struggled to lift it at first. It took a massive effort to secure the 15-foot corpse and hoist it into the air. The soldiers watched as the creature that had just ended their friend's life was flown away toward an unknown destination. Many believe it was taken to Bagram Air Base, while others think it was flown directly to a secret facility in the United States. Once the body was gone, the cleanup crew moved into the cave. They took the shattered gear, the bones, and even the spent shell casings. It was as if they were erasing the entire event before the sun could even set. Back at the base, the soldiers were not given a chance to rest. They were separated and put into small rooms for questioning. Here is the deal: they were not asked about the enemy or the terrain. They were told that they had never seen a giant. They were given stacks of papers to sign, which were non-disclosure agreements with very scary terms. If they ever spoke about the red-haired giant, they would lose their rank, their pay, and possibly their freedom. The military told them that the squad they were looking for had been lost in a conventional ambush, and that Dan had died in a bomb blast. A lot of people are confused about why the government would hide something like this. Some say it is to prevent panic, while others think it is because the giant's biology could be used for research. One of the most overlooked aspects of the cover-up is how well it worked. There are no official press releases about a giant in Kandahar. If you check the military records from 2002, you will find a soldier named Daniel Romero who died in the area, but the cause of death is listed as an explosion. The government created a story that was easy to believe to hide a truth that was too wild for the public. But the soldiers did not forget. Even with the threats, whispers began to circulate through the ranks. Men would talk in low voices about the 15-footer in the cave and the six-fingered hands. They called it the Kandahar Giant. The story became an open secret among those who served in southern Afghanistan. They knew the truth because they had seen the bent rifles and the massive spear. For them, the war was no longer just about fighting insurgents. It was about knowing that something else was watching from the high peaks. Even with the documents signed and the body gone, the secret started to leak out into the world. Biblical monsters living in modern war. The story of the Kandahar Giant stayed in the shadows for over 10 years until an investigator named L.A. Marzulli brought it to light. He interviewed a man known only as Mr. K, who claimed to have been on the scene during that day in 2002. Mr. K described the encounter with incredible detail, and his story matched the whispers that had been floating around for years. He talked about the red hair, the 6 digits, and the way the military scrubbed the site. This interview turned a military rumor into a worldwide mystery. People began to realize that the Kandahar incident might not be an isolated event. See, there is a connection here that many are not seeing. In ancient texts, like the Old Testament, there are mentions of the Nephilim. These were described as giants of great strength and size who lived on the earth in ancient times. Many people believe the creature in Afghanistan was a descendant of these biblical beings. The description of the Nephilim matches the Kandahar giant almost perfectly. They were known for being violent, having extra fingers and toes, and living in remote places. This is not just a ghost story. For many, it is proof that ancient history is still alive in the modern world. And get this, there have been other sightings. In 2008 and 2009, a soldier in the Kandahar province reported seeing something massive through a thermal scope. He was watching a mountain ridge when a heat signature stood up that was taller than the trees. He estimated the creature was at least 12 feet tall. It moved with a slow, relaxed pace, but covered ground faster than a running man. He did not tell many people at the time because he did not want to be called crazy. But after hearing about the Kandahar giant, he realized he had seen the same race of beings. Another report came from a drone operator who was scanning northern Afghanistan at night. He saw 3 humanoid figures that were much larger than the goats standing next to them. Using the ruler tool on his screen, he measured them at 12 feet tall. They were gathered around a small fire, performing tasks that looked like chores. The operator watched them for 10 minutes before they moved out of view. These stories suggest that there is not just one giant, but perhaps a small population of them living in the most remote parts of the Hindu Kush Mountains. The crazy part is that these creatures seem to know how to stay hidden. They live in caves and move at night, avoiding large groups of people. They only come into contact with humans when their territory is invaded. Afghanistan is one of the most rugged places on Earth, with thousands of caves that have never been explored by modern scientists. It is the perfect place for an ancient race to hide from the rest of the world. What most people do not realize is that the war provided a rare chance for humans to enter these forbidden zones and come face to face with the unknown. New technology is catching things that used to stay hidden in the dark and the high peaks. Truth behind the desert shadows. So, here is the deal. Is the Kandahar giant a real creature, or just a story told by tired soldiers? When you look at the evidence, it is hard to walk away thinking it is all a lie. The consistency of the reports from different soldiers who do not know each other is hands down the strongest point. They all describe the same red hair, the same height, and the same 6 fingers. If this were just a myth, you would expect the details to change more over time. But the core of the story stays the same. which suggests that it is based on a real event that happened in those mountains. One of the most overlooked aspects of the whole mystery is the government's reaction. If it were just a tall tale, the Pentagon would not have gone to such lengths to deny it and silence the witnesses. Usually, when something is fake, the military ignores it. But with the Kandahar incident, they were very aggressive about making sure nobody talked. The missing flight logs and the reclassified death records point to a high-level cover-up. They wanted to make sure that the public never got a look at what was taken out of that cave in 2002. There is also the matter of the local Afghan people. They have stories of giants that go back hundreds of years. They do not think it is a conspiracy. They think it is a fact of life. They avoid certain caves and peaks because they know what lives there. To them, the Americans just stumbled into a place they were never supposed to go. It is not that simple, though, because the modern world is starting to encroach on these ancient spaces. As we build more and fly more drones, these secrets are becoming harder to keep. The truth is that we may never see the body of the giant or the spear it used. Those things are likely locked away in a basement where the public will never be allowed to go. But the stories of the men who were there provide a window into a world we do not fully understand. It reminds us that even in the age of satellites and internet, there are still parts of the planet that belong to something else. The Kandahar. Giant is a reminder that the Earth is much older and much stranger than we like to admit. What if there are other things hiding in the dark corners of the world that we are not ready to face? This story makes us wonder if we are really the masters of this planet, or if we are just visitors in a land that belongs to giants. As time goes on, more veterans might break their silence, and the puzzle pieces might finally fit together. Until then, we are left looking at the mountains and wondering what is looking back. Is it possible that ancient giants are still living among us in secret mountain caves today? Could the government really hide a 15-foot monster from the world for over 20 years? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe for more mysteries.